The task of the Frankfurt School, then, was first to undermine the Judeo-Christian legacy through an abolition of culture, Aufhebung der Kultur in Lukács German, and second, to determine new cultural forms which would increase the alienation of the population, thus creating a new barbarism. To this task there gathered in and around the Frankfurt School an incredible assortment of not only communists but also non-party socialists, radical phenomenologists, Zionists, renegade Freudians, and at least a few members of a self-identified cult of Astarte. The variegated membership reflected, to a certain extent, the sponsorship. Although the Institute of Social Research started with Comintern support, over the next 3 decades its sources of funds included, guess what, various German and American universities, the Rockefeller Foundation, Columbia Broadcasting System, the American Jewish Committee, several American intelligence services, the Office of the U.S. High Commissioner for Germany, the International Labour Organization, and the Hacker Institute, a posh psychiatric clinic in Beverly Hills. Similarly, the Institute's political allegiances, although top personnel maintained what might be called a sentimental relationship to the Soviet Union, there is evidence that some of them worked for Soviet intelligence into the 1960s, the Institute saw its goal as higher than that of Russian foreign policy. Stalin, who was horrified at the undisciplined cosmopolitan operation set up by his predecessors, cut the Institute off in the late 1920s. How about that? Forcing Lukács into self-criticism and briefly jailing him as a German sympathiser during World War II. In music, it is not suggested that one can compose better today than Mozart or Beethoven, said Adorno. But one must compose atonally, for atonalism is sick, and the sickness, dialectically, is at the same time the cure. The extraordinarily violent reaction protest which such music confronts in the present society appears nonetheless to suggest that the dialectical function of this music can already be felt negatively as destruction. The purpose of modern art, literature and music must be to destroy the uplifting, therefore bourgeois, potential of art, literature and music, so that man, bereft of his connection to the divine, sees his only creative option to be political revolt. To organise pessimism means nothing other than to expel the moral metaphor from politics and to discover in political action a sphere reserved 100% for images. An overwhelming amount of the philosophy and artifacts of the American counterculture of the 60s, plus the New Age nonsense of today, derives from a large-scale social experiment sited in Ascona, Switzerland, from about 1910 to 1935. Originally a resort area for members of Helena Blavatsky's Theosophy cult, the little Swiss village became the haven for every occult, leftist and racialist sect of the original New Age movement of the early 20th century. I don't think that the writer of this is quite twigging how important it is to have a first-hand search for reality at the base of our being and how we live life and operate in life. And that, in its true form, I believe, is covered by Norman Grubb in Yes, I Am, the book he wrote in 1985, which is the basis, and in fact, chapter 31 is entitled On Now to the Third Level, which simply refers to 1 John 2 having 3 stages of growth in Christianity. So I think that the person writing this is a bit too disparaging, but because that's really what attracted the people. It wasn't that people were attracted by being offbeat and eccentric for the sake of it. They were hungry. They were hungry for more than a society that espoused just rules and regulations. You think how it was in the early 20th century. Think about Virginia Woolf and all the constrictions she felt placed under. And women do. And that formed the basis of a lot of feminism. And it's not unreal either. It's not unreal. So that's the good thing about coming into third level Christianity. It's a new thing on the earth. But it's already been seen in Acts, admittedly mostly with men. But Mary Magdalene, mother of Jesus, also, they knew some stuff. Back to this. By the end of World War I, Ascona was indistinguishable from what Haight-Ashbury would later become, filled with health food shops, occult bookstores, hawking the I Ching and Naturmenschen with Mr. Naturals, who would walk about in long hair, beads, sandals and robes in order to get back to nature. The dominant influence in Ascona came from Dr. Otto Gross, a student of Freud and friend of Carl Jung, who had been part of Max Weber's circle when Frankfurt School founder Lukács was also a member. Gross took Beethoven to its logical extremes, and in the words of a biographer, is said to have adopted Babylon as his civilization, in opposition to that of Judeo-Christian Europe. If Jezebel had not been defeated by Elijah, world history would have been different and better, he said. Jezebel was Babylon, love religion, Astarte, Ashtoreth. By killing her, Jewish monotheistic moralism drove pleasure from the world. Held us back for centuries, I bet you believe that. Trouble is, when we only half do Christianity, he's kind of right. The joy comes in taking this thing right through, so we become bubbling wells of the Holy Spirit welling up to eternity. But half doing Christianity is a half-built tower. Only it's not salty. It's salt that's lost its flavour. Only good to be trampled on the roads. And Jesus said that. So don't censor me. Don't fact check that. Jesus said that. Gross's solution was to recreate the cult of Astarte in order to start a sexual revolution and destroy the bourgeois, patriarchal and family. Among the members of his cult were, guess, Frida and D.H. Lawrence, Franz Kafka, who I'm always quoting, Franz Werfel, the novelist who later came to Hollywood and wrote The Song of Bernadette, philosopher Martin Buber, Alma Mahler, the wife of composer Gustav Mahler. Yeah, people go on about Gustav being horrible, but what influences was Alma Mahler bringing into the house when he was wanting to compose really lofty music? Just saying that. I don't know. I don't know the couple. I haven't read enough books about them. I'm just mentioning that. And later, the liaison of Walter Gropius, Oskar Kokoschka, and Franz Werfel, among others. The Ordo Templis Orientalis, the occult fraternity set up by Satanist Aleister Crowley, had its only female lodge at Ascona. So that's saying something. It is sobering to realise the number of intellectuals now worshipped as cultural heroes who were influenced by the New Age madness in Ascona. Yeah, or else it's publishing companies run by Rothschild and other occult people who promoted these things and pushed them right to the fore. Don't you think? It's always a mixture, isn't it, between what people really, really acclaim and what these guys bring to market. The place and its philosophy figures highly in the works of not only Lawrence, Kafka and Werfel, but also Nobel Prize winners Gerhard Hauptmann and Hermann Hesse. Yeah, I studied him. H.G. Wells, Max Brod, Stefan George and the poets Rainer Maria Rilke and Gustav Landauer. In 1935, Ascona became the headquarters for Carl Jung's annual Uranus conference to popularize Gnosticism. Ascona was also the place of creation for most of what we call now modern dance. It was headquarters to Rudolf von Laban, inventor of the most popular form of dance notation, and Mary Wigman. Isadora Duncan was a frequent visitor. Laban and Wigman, like Duncan, sought to replace the formal geometries of classical ballet with recreations of cult dances, which would be capable of ritualistically dredging up the primordial racial memories of the audience. Or the secret 33rd degree reference point would be actually calling up demons in rituals. But we do not say that in polite society because we don't believe in demons in universities. When the Nazis came to power, Laban became the highest dance official in the Reich, and he and Wigman created the ritual dance program for the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin. See, we think all these things are new. Which was filmed by Hitler's personal director Leni Riefenstahl, a former student of Wigman. The peculiar occult psychoanalysis popular in Ascona was also decisive in the development of much of modern art. The Dada movement originated in nearby Zurich, but all its early figures were Asconans in mind or body, especially Guillaume Apollinaire, who was a particular fan of Otto Gross. When Berlin Dada announced its creation in 1920, its opening manifesto was published in a magazine founded by Gross. The primary document of surrealism also came from Ascona. Dr. Hans Prinzhorn, a Heidelberg psychiatrist, commuted to Ascona, where he was the lover of Mary Wigman. In 1922, he published a book, The Artwork of the Mentally Ill, based on paintings by his psychotic patients, accompanied by an analysis claiming that the creative process shown in this art was actually more liberated than that of the old masters. Prinzhorn's book was widely read by the modern artists of the time, and a recent historian has called it the Bible of the Surrealists. Yeah, but who's publishing these? Who's pushing them? Who paid the money that pushed all these things? Who's the ones that commissioned Marx, Nietzsche, and Darwin? In fact, created Marx, created Darwin, in that they were just ordinary individuals who we would never have heard of, but for astronomical support, incredible support financially. The Frankfurt School's original 1930s survey work, including the authoritarian personality, was based on psychoanalytic categories developed by Erich Fromm. Fromm derived these categories from the theories of J.J. Bachhofen, a collaborator of Nietzsche and Richard Wagner, who claimed that human civilization was originally matriarchal. And this is cultic because occult has at the very top, and until Lucifer made his appearance, people say, or as chosen person or representative, it was the grand dame of witchcraft that literally ran everything. But not so in under the lordship of Jesus Christ. The lordship of Jesus Christ, he raises up men and moves them through to the third stage of growth. It's men like Rees Howes and women like Mother Basilia Schlink, and the same, that have literally shaped what's going on here on Earth in the last century, counteracting things that all these other movements were trying to achieve a lot earlier. Later, Fromm utilized this theory to claim that support for the nuclear family was evidence of authoritarian tendencies. In 1970, 40 years after he first proclaimed the importance of Bachhofen's theory, the Frankfurt School's Erich Fromm surveyed how far things had developed. He listed 7 social psychological changes which indicated the advance of matriarchism over patriarchism. The woman's revolution, children's and adolescence revolution, based on the work of Benjamin Spock and others, allowing children new and more adequate ways to express rebellion. The rise of the radical youth movement, which fully embraces Bachhofen in its emphasis on group sex, loose family structure, and unisex clothing and behaviours. The increasing use of Bachhofen by professionals to correct Freud's overly sexual analysis of the mother-son relationship. This would make Freudianism less threatening and more palatable to the general population. The vision of the consumer paradise. In this vision, technique assumes the characteristics of the Great Mother, a technical instead of a natural one, who nurses her children and pacifies them with a never-ceasing lullaby in the form of radio and television. In the process, man becomes emotionally an infant, feeling secure in the hope that mother's breasts will always supply abundant milk and that decisions need no longer be made by the individual. This has been a direct attack, and a direct and successful attack. They knew what they were doing, we didn't. We just didn't know what was going on. The theory of the authoritarian personality. The Frankfurt School, let's stop there and I'll go to the next one.